Good evening, viewers, and welcome to All 24 Nightly News, coming to you live from Algiers. I'm your host, Karim Faz Zachary, and up next are the top stories. Sahrawi government seeks genuine opportunity for unrestricted access amid de Mistura's visit. Also in our news, Niger Military Council accepts Algerian President's crisis resolution initiative and pursues talks for swift French withdrawal. Former Catalan leader demands drop in prosecutions and official recognition of Catalan language for support in forming new government. Also ahead in our news. And Brent crude tops $90 per barrel, while Saudi Arabia and Russia continue to extend their production cuts. Hello again, and thank you for joining us. First off in our news, the Polisario Front rejected the notion of the UN envoy's visit being merely symbolic and instead emphasized the importance of using it as an opportunity for unrestricted access to the oppressed Sahrawi people in the occupied territories.
The Polisario Front emphasizes that the visit of the personal envoy to the occupied Sahrawi regions should not be an end in itself, but rather should constitute a real opportunity for the personal envoy of the Secretary General to have direct and unrestricted access to the record of repression and siege, especially imposed on the occupied cities of Laayoune and Dakhla. The personal envoy must witness directly the situation of Sahrawi detainees and political prisoners inside the prisons of Moroccan occupation state and the torture they are subjected to, humiliation and retaliatory practices, and deprivation of the most basic rights, as well as work to ensure their immediate and unconditional release.
And in the same context, Moroccan authorities violently suppressed a peaceful Sahrawi protest in occupied Laayoune on Monday, coinciding with the visit of UN Secretary General's personal envoy, Staffan de Mistura. Human rights reports describe the use of excessive force, denying demonstrators their right to demand an end to Moroccan occupation and the Sahrawi people's freedom, self-determination, and independence. Many Sahrawi citizens were injured, and demonstrators faced pursuit along with racist verbal abuse. The Polisario Front, via the Sahrawi Ministry of Information, squarely blamed the occupying state for this repressive escalation during the UN envoy's visit to occupied Sahrawi territories.
The Polisario Front holds the occupying state fully responsible for the new campaigns of repression and escalation it undertook during the visit of the UN envoy, and calls on the Security Council and the Secretary General of the United Nations to assume their responsibilities in protecting defenseless Sahrawi citizens.
Sahrawi President and Polisario Front Secretary General Ibrahim Ghali discussed his country's environmental efforts during his speech at the African Climate Summit in Nairobi, Kenya. He also highlighted the increased impact of climate change resulting from Moroccan occupation practices in the Sahrawi territories. Zahra Farjani reports.
President of the Sahrawi Republic, Secretary General of the Polisario Front Ibrahim Ghali, delivered a speech during the African Climate Summit held in the Kenyan capital Nairobi, where he presented the participants with the Sahrawi state's policy on green economy and the approach taken to combat climate change. Ghali highlighted the detrimental impact of Moroccan occupation on the environment in the Sahrawi lands. He further emphasized that the dire consequences of the overlap between climate change challenges and the Moroccan occupation, forcing over 200,000 Sahrawis to further exacerbate in their plight.
In the occupied territories of the Sahrawi Republic, the occupation practices that take place outside international law, without accountability or oversight, exacerbated the effects of climate change. The mandatory occupation wall, which divides our country into two parts, also deprives the liberated lands of water, which constitutes serious environmental degradation, increasing the effects of the drought in the region. We're facing these challenges related to climate change and struggling to end the colonization of our country. This situation has caused the displacement of more than 200,000 Sahrawi citizens to climate-harsh areas as temperatures in refugee camps reach record levels.
In his speech, President Ghali also criticized the United Nations for delaying the decolonization process of Western Sahara, the last colony in Africa. This delay has led to the deprivation of funds allocated to address the climate change crisis in the Sahrawi Republic. Ghali called for the Sahrawi Party to be represented to ensure their voice is heard on the global stage in the United Nations.
United Nations delay in completing the decolonization process of Western Sahara cannot be an excuse for the Sahrawi Republic not to fully engage in the global effort to address climate change and its devastating effects. It is unreasonable to deprive my country of funding allocated to confront the climate change crisis. Hence, it is necessary to represent the Sahrawi Party in the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and in the Conference of the Parties COPs. The Sahrawi voice will be an African voice that adds to and strengthens the African position.
In a positive development, the Sahrawi Republic, represented by Foreign Affairs Minister Mohamed Sidati, signed the Kampala Agreement on Migration, Environment and Climate Change. This agreement was reached during the African Union Foreign Ministers meeting in Nairobi, underlining the Sahrawi state's commitment to combat climate change. This step further solidifies the Sahrawi Republic's stance on addressing climate change and its determination to actively participate in global efforts to mitigate its effects.
In Africa still, Kenyan President William Ruto, speaking at the first African Climate Summit in Nairobi, advocated for the allocation of special drawing rights to countries in greatest need, emphasizing that this had not been done previously. He also expressed concern that African nations were burdened with interest rates 5 times higher than other borrowers and urged multilateral financial institutions to boost concessional lending. Ruto further called for a discussion on implementing a carbon emissions tax to fund development efforts.
Financial system that treats, and the biggest contributor to debt distress in our continent is high interest rates. We pay 5 times more than others, meaning that in fact the architecture is set up in a manner that if you borrow, it will be difficult for you to pay. And that is why we need a conversation, and a very candid conversation, and we are saying this in all honesty, around how do we get concessional funding? How do we pay as much as others are paying? How do we get Africa away from paying 5 times more?
Still in Africa, in a statement on Tuesday, the Burkina Faso army confirmed that a terrorist group was responsible for an attack in the northern part of the country, resulting in the tragic loss of 53 citizens. The statement from the Burkinabe General Staff also reported that during the attack, 17 soldiers and 36 Homeland Defense volunteers lost their lives on Monday, with an additional 30 individuals sustaining injuries. Algerian Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf is visiting Turkey on Wednesday following President Abdelmajid Tebboun's request. During this visit, Mr. Attaf will co-chair the second session of the Algerian-Turkish Joint Planning Committee with Turkish counterpart Hakan Fidan. The main agenda is preparing for an upcoming summit between President Tebboune and Erdogan in Algeria as part of their high-level cooperation council. Minister Attaf will also meet the Turkish president and hold discussions with the president of the Turkish Grand National Assembly, Numan Kurtulmus. Algerian Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf held discussions with his British counterpart addressing the ongoing crisis in Niger and President Abdelmajid Tebboun's proposed political solution. This conversation occurred during a phone call with the British Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, Lord Tariq Ahmed. The two ministers also tackled the challenges in implementing the peace agreement in Mali, which originated from Algiers' initiative. They explored opportunities for cooperation and coordination between their nations, notably considering Algeria's upcoming non-permanent UN Security Council membership starting next year. Furthermore, they prepared for the upcoming session of the Algerian-British Strategic Dialogue scheduled for November in London. Niger's Prime Minister Mohamed Ali Amin al-Zain accepted Algeria's crisis resolution initiative and voiced its importance. Meanwhile, he expressed concerns about potential unjust war due to ACOWAS threats and reaffirmed Niger's readiness. Islam Sid reports.
The military-appointed Prime Minister Mohamed Amin al-Zain has officially received the initiative of Algeria to resolve the Niger's crisis. During a press conference on Monday, Zain emphasized that the Algerian initiative will play a crucial role in finding a solution to the country's crisis.
I'll see the Algerian initiative as a contribution to the efforts made by a number of sisterly and neighboring countries. A few days ago, I received the Algerian ambassador and I assured him that we will definitely study this initiative.
In response to ECOWAS's threat of military intervention, Zain expressed concerns about what he called an unjust war looming over Niger, affirming the readiness of Niamey's authorities to face any potential scenarios.
They are in an illegal situation. I believe that the changes that are currently taking place should allow very quickly the withdrawal of these forces from our country.
As regard of French military presence, Prime Minister Zain considered the French forces in Niger an illegal act after the government in Niamey ended all military agreements with them.
As a responsible government, we expect the country to be attacked at any time, and this is unfortunate. All arrangements have been made so that we can defend ourselves. You should know that, I say clearly, all their arrangements will be an unjust war.
For her part, the French foreign minister revealed the possibility to withdraw French forces from Nigerian soil, citing the complexity of their situation.
The French forces deployed in Niger can no longer continue to perform their anti-terrorism duties and train local soldiers. Today, this mission can no longer be guaranteed because, de facto, we no longer conduct joint operations with the Nigerian armed forces. The situation of the French military forces in Niger is more complex than in Burkina Faso and Mali because Paris does not have much time to organize the departure of a large number of soldiers and heavy equipment.
As the military agreements it adheres to with Niger have expired, Paris could face a heavy blow and lose its last strongholds of influence in the African Sahel region, as the wave of coups including Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger rose against France, and which these nations accuse of looting their rich resources.
And in related news, the Libyan Presidential Council, represented by Musa al-Kouni, issued a warning about the potential outbreak of conflict in Niger, which could worsen security conditions and negatively affect the entire region, including Libya. Al-Kouni conveyed this message during a high-level working session conducted via remote communication with European Union experts in Tunisia. He reiterated the urgent need for international support to stabilize Niger and prevent the far-reaching consequences of unrest on neighboring countries. In response to the dismissed Foreign Minister Najla al-Mangoush's meeting with the Zionist Foreign Minister in Rome, the Libyan House of Representatives made substantial amendments to the law criminalizing normalization during an emergency session led by the President Aguilar Saleh. They removed the maximum penalties specified in Law 75 concerning the criminalization of ties with the Zionist entity. Additionally, the Legislative Assembly set up an investigation committee to scrutinize the meeting between Najla al-Mangoush and Ali Cohen and established a permanent parliamentary committee to address the Palestinian issue. And speaking of Palestine's residents of Tulkarm Governorate mourned the young martyr Ayed Sami Khalid Abu Harb, killed by Zionist occupation forces in the North Shams camp. The funeral commenced at the Mater Tabit Governmental Hospital, drawing a large crowd of locals chanting takbirs and condemning the occupation's crimes while demanding accountability. The procession moved through city streets, reaching the martyr's family home in North Shams camp. There, his parents, family, and friends bid their farewells. A prayer took place at the Abu Bakr Siddiq Mosque in the camp, followed by his burial in the martyr's cemetery. The Palestinian Foreign Ministry squarely blamed the Israeli government for the brutal attack on North Shams camp in Tulkarm. In a statement, they emphasized that such violence should not be reduced to mere statistics, as it causes immense suffering for Palestinian families. The ministry condemned the camp attack as a war crime against humanity and called on the International Criminal Court to take action and fulfill its obligations in addressing the ongoing attacks against the Palestinian people. To other news now, Spanish separatist politician Carles Puigdemont, sought by the Spanish judiciary, has outlined conditions for supporting any new prime minister, requiring the cessation of measures against the separatist movement. In Brussels' press conference, Puigdemont also called for Catalan's recognition as an official language within the European Union. In Brussels, acting Deputy Prime Minister Yolanda Díaz engaged in negotiations with Puigdemont, part of outgoing Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez's efforts to forge a coalition government, enabling him to retain power.
L'abandonament complet i efectiu.
The complete and effective abandonment of judicial proceedings against independence and its supporters, the 1st of October, will not be a crime. Abandoning the suppression of our movement is a moral requirement and must be permanent. I point out the importance of recognizing Catalonia's own language as an official language of the European Union. We know that if Spain wants, these are preconditions that must be met before the end of the legal period to avoid new elections.
Hi ha de ser un abandonament permanent.
To other developments in Europe, tensions continue as Russian Ministry of Defense intercepted 3 drones with no casualties. Despite the intense Ukrainian counteroffensive, the Russian defense minister claims Ukraine's failure. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky made an unannounced visit to Bakhmut to check on his troops. More updates with Salman Asif this time.
The Russian Ministry of Defense successfully intercepted 3 drones attempting to attack Moscow. No casualties were reported, but the Strinsky district suffered damage from the falling debris. Despite these intensive attacks from Ukraine, Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu confirmed the Ukrainian army's failure to achieve its goals in their 3-month counterattack. Despite significant losses, Ukrainian forces made no significant advances. Russian forces had been constantly targeting Ukraine's military infrastructure, including the recent bombing of 34 command centers in a month.
The Kiev regime, despite colossal losses, has been trying to conduct its so-called counteroffensive for 3 months. Ukraine's armed forces have not achieved their goals on any front.
In Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky made an unannounced visit to the front lines in Donetsk and Zaporizhzhia. He interacted with troops in these regions, where Kiev forces are pushing towards the Sea of Azov. Zelensky awarded medals to soldiers and promised to take their feedback about the conflict seriously.
Generals, soldiers, I'm honored to be here today and thank you from the bottom of my heart on behalf of the Ukrainian people for the defense of our country, borders, for your life which you together with your brothers are giving away for every inch of our beloved independent land.
In a concerning development, a group opposing cluster munitions reported an alarming 8-fold increase in casualties from their use last year, totaling over 1,000 victims. Most incidents occurred within the context of the Ukraine conflict.
The number of casualties from cluster munitions overall in 2022 was the highest number ever recorded by the Cluster Munition Monitor since reporting began in 2010. And this is really significant. It means that the global number of casualties was higher than during the peak of the conflict outcomes in Syria.
This report serves as a sobering testament to the urgent need for international efforts to address and prevent such devastating consequences of the ongoing volatility in the region, and the need for diplomatic solutions to de-escalate tensions and mitigate the suffering of those affected by the conflict.
Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova stated in a press conference that Russia considers the potential return of American nuclear weapons to British territory as an escalation. This response was prompted by a report from the Federation of American Scientists, which suggested that the U.S. Air Force's draft budget indicates the possibility of such a move.
You know, this step, if implemented, we will consider it an escalation step that leads exactly in the opposite direction to resolving the urgent issue of withdrawing all American nuclear weapons from European countries. Let me remind you that they are deployed there as part of the so-called joint nuclear mission for NATO. We will continue to demand the return of all U.S. nuclear weapons to American soil, followed by the removal of the infrastructure that would allow their rapid deployment in Europe.
And in other news, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is in talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin about supplying North Korean weapons to Moscow as part of ongoing negotiations. The U.S. National Security Council spokesperson Adrian Watson noted the rapid progress in these negotiations, anticipating high-level diplomatic discussions in Russia. However, Russian presidential spokesman Dmitry Peskov hasn't confirmed reports of a forthcoming meeting between Putin and Kim, citing American media sources that quoted officials. The proposed meeting, slated for September, aims to discuss military cooperation between the two nations. To different news now. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Mao Ning defended China's decision to suspend imports of all Japanese aquatic products as completely legitimate, reasonable, and necessary. This action was taken in response to Japan's release of nuclear contaminated water into the ocean, which China deemed totally unacceptable.
We have repeatedly stated China's solemn position on the issue of Japan's discharge of nuclear contaminated water into the sea. Japan's forcible discharge of its nuclear contaminated water into the ocean is unprecedented since the mankind began the peaceful utilization of nuclear energy, nor is there any universally recognized standards for disposal. The international community has extensively concerned about the risks to be incurred by Japan's move to the marine environment and public security, and taken relevant preventive measures. China's relevant measures are completely legitimate, reasonable, and necessary.
In other economic news, Brent crude prices surged past $90 per barrel, a level not seen since November 2022. On Tuesday, oil prices saw a 2% increase, with Brent crude futures rising by about $1.50 and U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures exceeding $87 per barrel. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia has extended its voluntary oil production cut of 1 million barrels per day for an additional 3 months to support oil market stability. Russia, the world's second largest oil exporter, has also decided to continue reducing its oil exports until the end of this year. Russia initially pledged a cut of 500,000 barrels per day in August, later easing restrictions to 300,000 barrels per day in September. And finally, in our news, German automakers, long synonymous with cutting-edge automotive technology, are facing a challenge in the global electric vehicle race to catch up China's speed. This highlights the growing dominance of China in electric vehicle production and innovation. More in the report.
These are not scenes from a science fiction movie. It's just the Munich Car Show that invites you to visit the exciting world of automotive technology. This huge exhibition showcases future cars. In a global industry that's constantly evolving, the battle for market dominance and technological supremacy in fierce, Europe's car makers have a fight on their hands to produce lower-cost electric vehicles and erase China's lead in developing cheaper, more consumer-friendly models. All automakers here are joining forces under one roof, pushing the boundaries of high-tech vehicles. in terms of motorization, safety, and design.
It's an expansion of a partnership that we had with BMW. We're working for them for over a decade. And it's part of been moving towards this car that is becoming digital, is evolving to a software-defined vehicle. We've been working together with them, not only connecting the car to the cloud, the digital cockpit experience, but also ADAS and autonomy. We're making a lot of progress together, and I think it's part of their next platform, and we're very proud of being a part of that project.
Europe has been making strides in technology, especially in the electric vehicle market. The continent has cemented its position as an industry leader. The era of electric cars is upon us, with Munich as the epicenter of this technological revolution.
Europe is a highly competitive market with many local brands. As Chinese automaker and rapidly evolving in electrification, we have accumulated a lot of experience. Chinese electric vehicles have great advantages in terms of autonomous driving technologies, smart cockpits, and a supply chain that supports them.
At the Munich Auto Show, you'll find cutting-edge electric vehicles and assistance systems on display, from compatibility devices to automatic units and charging points. The future course for transportation is set, and as it seems right here, is going to be electric.
The end of our program. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.